Open things up with the tribute checks. We had a few at Persia in there. They automatically succeed. That's just a matter of because they have no cities. And then both Syria and Phrygia succeeded in their roll or failed to roll what was needed, the 6s, to get the tribute. That puts us over on Elam, and I figured out what the ended turn marker is for. It shows where the break in the impulse rounds is going to be. It's not in the rules, but you know. I was wondering what can I use for that, and then I saw that counter lying around. Elam is going to open up with local dealers demand protection. The trade markers for this 1 power cannot be removed from the trade box this turn. That's kind of cool. It doesn't cost anything. And now I only have $4 to spend. Kind of like the idea of engaging in a lot of trade war, given that I have nothing out there. So I'm going to spend 3 of that 4 to drop stuff into these trade boxes. Now you could say, well, now you're getting complicated here with these numbers. So I'm going to put these down here, I think. On turn 2, impulse round 1. It's supposed to go on the Assyrian track, but frankly there's more on the Assyrian track than can handle it, and Edom's track seems like a good choice. And that'll give me 1. Do I want to put more out there? Nah. Anything else I put out comes out of here. These guys, it's kind of a bonus. They don't cost me anything to put in there. But, you know, honestly, see the problem, if I put guys in here, it costs me 1 to put them in there, and then 1 to get them out of there next turn, when I'm likely to be in a war state again. So that's I'll leave a couple open for other people to play, and they can't hurt me. I'm just upping the ante for everyone else in terms of that, and I'll probably be spending a point to activate raiders every impulse that I get. Puts it over here. Assyria is not allowed because they're not allowed in the first. Everybody's allowed 1 shot without it, without any possibility of an interrupt. Okay, let's see who's gone so far. Phoenicia started building up an army. Their plan here is to absorb that eventually. I didn't have quite enough points, and I haven't built it all up yet. But to absorb, well, I've only got 3 units. That might work. I didn't have enough points after building them, though. To absorb them into an Assyrian army group, because multinational forces can only operate that way. Declare war on Judah. I've conquered Israel, so I have the right of transit through them. I think I have the right of transit through anyone who's paying me tribute, actually. And I can just march down and attack Jerusalem, who is not paying me tribute, are they? Oh, yes, they are. No, they're paying the Egyptians tribute. I'll have to declare war on Jerusalem if that's the case. And to tell you the truth, I don't know. They're not allied, so they actually they do owe me tribute. And I didn't check them. They're the only one I didn't check for this. So let me make sure. I get 3 dice. Okay, they did not refuse tribute, so they're actually paying me tribute as Assyria. There's another point. So I think I have the right of transit through Jerusalem to attack the Egyptians. And obviously Gaza, if I so desire. After that, let's see. Big skip through everyone, really. Urartu is at war. I had to assign who's got what. So for the first impulse, The Cimmerians are going to be under the rebel camp, but they have some restrictions. They have to try to destroy Urartu, and therefore Urartu is going to be under the Assyrian camp. I don't know. I should be assigning one player within the camp, the Cimmerians, but since I'm playing solo, it's not really a big deal. If it comes to a point where one of these powers can be misused by someone, or one of these minor countries can be misused in this way, that's fine, but right now that's just not an issue. So we have a war that's kind of almost a foreign war here between the Cimmerians and Urartu, that has no effect on anything except once the Cimmerians take Urartu out, they become a pain in the ass, probably for Assyria and the Medes, just kind of rampaging between the two. And then the Cimmerians are up next, and we'll see what they do. They get a random card. And they get a Cimmerian truce. I don't think they're going to play that, are they? This may depend on who... No. The Cimmerians can't play it against themselves. Can't be played before the second game turn. So, they're going to have 4 points to try to advance. Now, they've got a problem. They can't form an army group. So, they may have to hit in 2 waves or whatever. We'll see what happens there. So I think I'm only allowed to do 1 siege event. I moved the first force in with my... first point spent was for supply. Actually, that shouldn't even be there. There should be a pillage marker there, because this is where we started. First point, I can spend supply if I don't pillage, but I must pillage if possible. I move into here with first stack. The Urartu are sitting in the fortress. I decide I can't really assault that. Now, I don't have to start the siege there, but the problem is I've got 2 units here. Conceivably, I could actually move the second stack 1, 2 into here, and this maybe I can actually besiege. So let's do that instead. Try to speed the process up. The Medes aren't necessarily thrilled with that idea, but that's what we're going to do. And I think we'll declare normal siege because we have the best chance with that. 2 at 3 do nothing. Here. Now, an assault, I'd only have to get more than the opponent has. But here, let's do my leader. No, I get no special units, so I get 2 dice at 3. It's not a fortress, so they're not reduced. No, and then 3 dice at 2. And I got no hits whatsoever. So that was kind of a... I didn't take any damage either, so it kind of works out okay. Once we take all the Urartu territories, they're conquered and actually eliminated, because they've already been conquered once before. An interesting situation which I was hoping to exploit with the Medes, but I don't think I really can. What the situation is I just got attacked across the mountains here. And I have an all-cav force. It could do an ambush, which is I fire my horsebowmen, and if I had any chariots, and then run away. The problem is there's so many damn heavies in this attack that I'm not going to get that opportunity. So I almost feel like I have to give way and try to let this fall into a single battle. The problem with that, of course, is I've already got more forces here than I can command. Well, no, I'm at my limit. So I might want to try to do some attrition damage, do what I can, and then fall back and buy some mercenaries for cheap. Because it's just obvious to me that I can't stand against the Assyrians fully, but if I cause them enough damage, maybe they won't be able to pursue me because they're fixing that damage, and they're fixing damage from the fights that they're taking on all sides. That's my hope, at least. funny thing about it all is that in an open field battle, horse bowmen and any kind of bowmen are really neutralized by these heavy units. There's no way I can do enough damage to overcome the heavies. Now, I think the same holds here. So I'm going to make this a heavy, the chariot, so it won't fire bow fire, which will get negated by this thing. So, on to the regular combat. These two bow units, they have essentially no ability to fight. They've been knocked down and out of. They can't do any damage whatsoever. The Assyrians mighty enough to just roll through all of this and conquer it all. Took out all the troops. That's what's left is just some routed stuff that maybe I'll get into the trade box. It looks to me like the Medes are done, and their question is, what do I want to do about this? Well, whatever damage that the Assyrians do is going to be a pain in the ass for them. They're going to have to go, I think they take attrition going through Mede zones, 2 AP and attrition, and they're going to have to, that's kind of interesting, the Mede mercenaries don't operate back there either. They're going to have to cope with a lot of terrain to get an automatic conquest. There's no conquest roll, if I recall correctly, against the Medes. So that means that I've got to take it all out if I want to defeat them. And once I do that, with all the expense for that, well, then the Medes can be knocked out of the game and they end up as barbarians. It's a potential outcome here, just because if the Assyrians do knock out a couple of players, if they knock out the Medians, and you know the rules kind of suggest not trying to go for this strategy, but if they knock them out, others are easy to knock out, actually, and destroy permanently. I don't think you can destroy Babylon permanently, actually. I'd have to look that up. I know that they have this ability to recover that I think might include that. It would be spoken of here, perhaps. I've got a reduced conquest check. I don't know if that's good or bad. I think that's bad for them. But anyway, what it all amounts to is it might be better for me to deal with marauding bands than with these nation states. Now, the Medians are special because you can't wipe them out completely. Even if you do, I think they come back. So it might not be worth conquering them in particular, simply because that would evoke these, and then also there would still be Medians. I'd have to check that. I still have a reasonable amount of points after recovering my army and charging through a big chunk of territory there. I have to decide what I'm doing. This force is probably not going to take an active role, so I'm looking probably more at trying to do something against the Babylonians. Looked up those eliminations and found some interesting things. First of all, you don't have to totally conquer it. You only have to drop it to 2 or less controlled cities after it's been defeated, which may spell badly for the Ubuntu or whatever flavor of Linux that is up there. And it's removed from the game once it is. Now, the only minor that's allowed, Urartu, is the Urartu. They're the only one that can be eliminated. It's not clear whether only the Scythians can eliminate them. Scythians and Cimmerians. The Scythians or Cimmerians can eliminate Urartu, and they don't need to conquer it first, which is something that's different from what I said. With the Medes, for them to come back, they need to play the Gathering of the Tribe, and then things get really funny in terms of how this is written. The Gathering of the Tribe cards, so the power is never completely eliminated. If the Mede uses Gathering the Tribe card for Resurrection, they no longer get Eco Plus markers in the Far East box. I don't know if that eliminates the ones that are out there. If the Medes are brought back into play, the owning player permanently controls both the substitute country and the Mede. And then, I don't know. If I eliminate other people, they become 2 minors instead. once I get through the Scythians and the Cimmerians, if a third or fourth player gets eliminated, they get a pair of miners. And from what I can tell, since miners can never be eliminated, they wouldn't have that ability. But they'd be so weak that it really seems to me to a great advantage to start eliminating countries when possible. I see nothing special about Babylon. I think, you see, what I remembered was a discussion about how Babylon rose from the ashes again and again. Well, yeah, there's nothing in the game that seems to apply that except their reconstruction, which allows them to rebuild a city. Doesn't give it back to them. Babylonian market doesn't help one bit. That they have to control their whole original territory for that to come in handy. I don't think that's going to happen, except maybe late in the game. So Assyria is in the point where they've got a few things they'd be interested in. If they can knock the Medes out temporarily, the Babylonians, and get an army moving into Egypt, they could knock the entire rebel camp out of the game. There's no one left who can declare war on them for that case. So they've got a possibility of ending the game at this point. And they're so far ahead in victory points with an extra 15 because of that plus marker. In this early stage of the game, knocking everyone out might be the best way to go. And maybe this would be a quick game that way. Yeah, relatively. As to the length, I played really slowly originally, taking a break after every card. I'm doing a little better now, but the Assyrian big turns, like this one, I have to take breaks in the midst of the turn still. Actually, the Assyrians finished off their turn banking themselves 4 points, just to make sure that they have a reasonable amount of points for their next turn. They used a lot this turn. I'm holding off on the attack on Babylon. This is the problem. Maybe I should only bank 3. The problem here is I can hire mercenaries if I'm here, but I wanted to rebuild Babylon, so I spent 4 points on that. Cheap, Now Babylon's pretty well defended by a bowman in the walls. I have to leave a garrison plus the 4 wall defense strength. You can build it all up all at once in one turn. Now I don't really have the points to build up any mercenaries and launch an attack against the Babylonians. The problem there, of course, is the Babylonians can build up their army, and then I'm stuck maybe doing the hunger siege against them, which is an unpleasant task. Ooh, I gotta pay for this guy too. It's hard to remember where all my troops that are in opposing territory are. So like this guy's in what's now Assyrian home territory. Okay, we just finished the Babylonian turn because that's where the turn ended marker is. Now we're available for preemptions to start taking place. Let's see what happened here. First up, the Medes. The Medes played a card. They bought themselves some points, but they played a card that gave them the Phrygian Alliance Breaker card. They got a crap roll, 2 dice, they got a 3. I was kind of hoping to maybe get the Phrygians up high enough, where maybe eventually they'd get up into Alliance. The idea being, it's pretty tough to just spend points on boosting someone up, but using a card like that for that kind of effect, if it got me medium way up, it becomes something to start working towards, and then something, maybe to drain some of the Assyrian points away from while they're busy trying to placate the Phrygians. For Egypt, they played this careful preparation card. This is kind of cool, except I didn't draw them a new card. This is actually a really neat card. You don't get to use this or any other card for this phase. This one has an action point cost of 0. And what it does is next turn, they're going to get double their eco income, which I think doesn't include their tribute. So that's a pretty decent amount of money for the Egyptians. They're a kind of wealthy little state right now. So that's kind of awesome. They had the trade and everything, which is cool. The exchange for that 6 that they're getting next turn, they got their 6 this turn plus the tribute, etc. In exchange for the 3 that they are foregoing this turn. They get 6 more next turn. So that it seems like a good buy overall. They built up their forces, built themselves an army group. You see the Medes sold theirs back. And tried to do a siege. They got a little bit of success there, not much. It's a 3-point fortress. They're doing standard siege effort there. It might make sense actually for them to blow 2 of their points on this to get Israel, Judea or Judah into alliance, and I'll set them up there as well. And then let's go back and fix something. You know, I feel boned that way when I'm playing. I've mentioned this in other games. When I'm playing something opposed, I'm so used to going back and fixing things. And usually when I'm playing one-on-one, my opponent's fine with it. But when I'm playing something in a multiplayer game like this, I always feel like, shit, you know, I'm not even going to bring it up. Or I might point out, well, I really screwed up there. But I don't really expect, anyone to offer that I recover that kind of situation. On a learning game, playing a game of 1846 recently, where some of the I was constantly changing my mind about things. Just horrible about that. You know, I just should stop and shut up when and not whine about it. The Babylonians did not turn in their army group card. This is a hard thing. I found people wishing they had kept their army group card in the last turn. So this time, well, the Assyrians have kept both theirs. Egypt obviously kind of needs theirs, actually. Babylon's not sure they're going to need theirs. Those 5 points would be useful, but that's the army group for the entire turn. And they actually have something up their sleeve where they might be busting out of Uruk here and able to actually beat the Assyrians if things fall well into their hands. That's their dream, at least. Otherwise, you know, if they're just going to stay bottled up here, they probably are better off selling it off. And they didn't buy that second leader. They have shit leaders because they don't have a king. They were supposed to have kept the same one from last time if they made a successful roll. And now I understand the retained roll. And they don't have leaders which really benefit them. They're going to have to win a battle or take a city. I think if these guys take the city, I get a chance at upgrading him. I'll have to look that up when it happens. So, we're back around, and it's going to be Dom's turn. I got to remember to put those Judah people on the board. Is there something else? I don't know. Start to pull them out to set them up. I realized, wow, they're paying tribute twice. Once to the Egyptians, once to the Assyrians. That's how it should be. But now they're part of the Assyrian camp, so they stop paying to the Assyrians, and I've dropped the Assyrian tribute, and I've dropped the cost to Judah as well. Sorry about my shaky hand there, jeez. For all my complaints about the player aids, most especially the rule book, I do want to point out this game is kind of cool in terms of the graphical layout of the board. I feel it's very easy to see what's going on, and the links are clearly defined, except maybe in the desert it's a little harder to see these, but I'm finding maybe on camera it's worse than normally. The bubbles are pretty clearly expressed. The little city spaces are nicely done. It may not be the most attractive map in the world, but it is definitely very functional. And you know, I feel like I can see pretty well what's going on in it in a way. I just want to point out the kind of nice things that once you kind of get into the flow and figure out what rules, you know, how you want to interpret the rules, and you get into a pattern of play, while you might lose some things that were intended just because it's hard to remember everything, it is a very complex game with a very difficult way to get at the rules. And like I said, I didn't see too much advantage to the living rules. Certainly not organizationally. The components seem to work well. You get used to the using of the victory point markers on their plus side, etc. The only thing, there are a couple of little places where I feel like there are tracks that maybe would be helpful. The game turn impulse round. I wish there was something that was purpose to that. a little bit better. This works, but it's not optimal. Okay, Elam goes all big on raiding, actually. They smacked, actually, Assyria a couple of times here, and trade and such not, and threw some boats out. They're looking to get the victory points and to try to hurt other people, especially Assyria when they can help it. They managed to knock 2 off Assyria, 1 by luck and 1 by a pick, because they got Elam for a power. Now on a 6 they still get nothing. They don't get to pick that. And then we went to the Phoenicians, who gathered their army into Assyrian army group 2. Now it's time for Judah to go, as I skip forward, and I'm going to preempt that with Assyria. Because now that I've gotten my forces gathered, I can hit into there. And I may have other things I want to do too. Remember, I don't get my income, though, in this point. That was a big cheat that I had in my last game, my last turn. And I may want to put more pressure on the Medes or on Babylon or whatever. I'm not sure yet. My goal right now, though, is actually to knock Judah out of the war. And the one thing I definitely, the reason that I came to doing this video, this point in the video, was because I don't just want to hit. It's not that there was something here. There was something important. Oh yeah, Judah was paying me tribute, so they don't have a no tribute marker on them. I don't have to punish them, but I do want to kind of get my start on trying to conquer Egypt here. If I can catch this up a little bit, not much happened here. Judah built some bowmen. They couldn't build their cool mercenary, which I forgot to draw, because they can't have a mercenary alone. And or R2 or whatever, they played their card, built up some additional forces. Not much they can do with them. They spent all their points on them. They don't have anything left. Actually, Judah's at -1 here. They went into some deficit spending. I don't know to what degree you're allowed to do that. And now it's the Cimmerians. And here's the thing. The Assyrians are playing the Cimmerians for this round. And they would really rather not have the Cimmerians beat the Urutu, and they have this cool pass impulse card, and I was thinking, I could play 0. But if you pass an impulse, you still take attrition, which is no big deal. I don't mind if the Cimmerians get kind of beaten up here, but you still get your siege actions, and I'm not allowed to kind of fail at their mission here. What I'd love to do is go use them for something else, but the best thing they can do towards conquest is taking these 2 cities. They do that, and Urutu is gone, and then, of course, the Cimmerians will be available to attack against Assyria itself, so I'll need to build up another army to cope with them. Nothing prevents me from playing them very foolishly, and I launched assaults on both cities. This one I did not take, and I took a little bit of damage from. That's not a big deal, but boy, the fortress, I am not in a good shape to do that. And I ended up doing 1 point, which does no damage. An assault either wins or it doesn't. You have to do more points than the opponent. But I took 8 points with my Cimmerians here, which now I can take as losses. Oh, there's 2. There's 4. I'm killing all the best units. 5. 6. And 8. And the Cimmerians are basically hosed by this. Somebody wants them to win, somebody doesn't. I think they're going to be in trouble every time because of that, because of the alternating turns. I don't know how you could resolve that in any reasonable fashion, but there's where we got. I think the hunger siege is actually broken, but the Urutu can come out and fight their way out, and they'll save themselves this way. Yay them. Of course, they don't have to. They can be kind of foolish on the whoever is controlling them for the rebel side. And that swings us back around here, and Well, I could have jumped in, but I'm low on points with the Assyrians. I played one big card to be able to jump in and attack. There's mixed reasons why I might want to get attacks in or not, but that's what we've been seeing so far. Assyrians finish their job. They leave a Phoenician garrison down here in Jerusalem. They didn't get a success on the check for surrender. It was only a 1 in 6, I think. I don't know. There may be I think there's a penalty if you have, there's a bonus if you have the capital. And then started a siege here, and then they went through, and you can see they swept through the Medes. They've taken all the easy places. Now they got to start fighting their way through. The surrender of the Medes, they managed to pick up the one good mercenary that the Medes left behind, a chariot unit. They didn't want to buy the rest. They used up all their points on this attack. And now we're on the Medes, and what the hell are they going to do? Well, I just played the Medians, and nothing too exciting there. They built up some additional forces. I think their card... Shit. That wasn't it. I don't know where their card went. They threw in... Oh, they used the Gathering the Tribes and put themselves some more points up in here, as well as building up some forces. They're pretty close to the limit as to not being able to use that card. Now, it's unlikely that the Assyrians will add too many more forces, but it seems to be actually happening, so it's kind of worrisome, which is that I'm leaving Assyrian forces behind as garrisons. I can't use mercenaries for that, and buying up mercenaries for the army, which is making it so that there are actually a lot of troops inside my home territory. So this is one of the last chances maybe that I'll get to do it. And then I think, well, gee, the Assyrians might want to interrupt. The problem is they don't have cash in hand, and unless they use a big card, they're not going to get to do much. But even if they do use a big card, they've got a big penalty on them, which is all these, not this one yet, but all these areas where they've got points that they've been building up in pillage, they've got to pay for. And right off the bat, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is actually not theirs anymore, their unit. So they're going to have to pay like 5 of their action points immediately. Well, that was the card I was thinking of playing, was a 5. And I was thinking, well, with a 5, I could do a lot down here. But as their aggression increases and they're, pushing through a lot of territories that they haven't conquered yet, and that they can't pull out of easily, it's becoming more and more difficult to do these interrupts. So they chose not to, which is going to allow Egypt to get a turn here that I was kind of hoping to remove from them, but I just can't afford the attrition costs of continually moving this military machine at this point. Let's see, some more raiding by Edom here. Phoenicia upgraded some of their forces that were sitting in the Assyrian army. That's the last turn that Phoenicia is going to get. They're out of cards, unless the turn takes long enough that they build up 5 points. This is something I'm not sure is supposed to happen or not. Basically, if you don't get an impulse, how do you get the money? If you don't have an impulse, you probably should. You maybe shouldn't, the way it's written, get cash for having an impulse bypassed. But on the other hand, if you don't get that cash, you won't have the $5. Like, if you don't have the $5 in hand, which you cannot because you can only store 4, there's no way to get to that $5. So obviously you have to collect. Do you only collect if you break 5 or not? I don't know. So what I'm doing is I'm allowing the countries to collect income no matter what, and then if they have $5, they can have a turn. Otherwise, they have this sort of truncated turn where they do collect the income and they also pay for attrition costs and such not. So here's a problem. I'm part of this greater army here, which maybe because it's multinational, it should be eating up the land more. This certainly is. There's no problem with that. I judged that it shouldn't, but I think that's wrong. I think I should be taking a penalty with these guys anyway. It's not that big a deal in this case, but it could be in some. Moving onward, Judah has nothing. They got to get rid of their deficit basically with the buck they had running through Urutru. This time run by I guess I can't keep track of who's what, but I had it run by I guess the rebels this time. They didn't really have anything to do. They had no cards. They collected their income. So it wasn't like they could do much anyway. But then coming to the Cimmerians this time, I'm sure they're supposed to be the rebels. And I had kind of a problem there. The card I drew, it was an interesting card, which I might have wanted to do. But instead I did this siege here. And we're kind of running into a problem here, which is that I can't move these guys out easily. There's not enough of them for this hunger siege to even be in existence anymore after that assault. However, I don't have to take the capital to destroy Urutru. All I have to do is take, say, this and then this. So it's still kind of a crapshoot where we get with that. And now we're back to Assyria again. And the Assyrians continue to conquer the Mede territory. They've got it down to only 3 cities left. Expensive actions to patrol into here. They got to pay an attrition check on each unit that crosses those white borders. They've been able to, fund the supplies up here, which are getting rather extensive, as well as the cost for repairing units so that they can keep attacking. We'll see. Whether or not they're able to face the final city. That's going to be a tough fight, really, because they're going to be most worn out by the time they hit there. Meanwhile, Judah has fallen, and that caused an immediate evacuation of the Phoenicians. They had to go to the nearest occupied space or friendly space that ended up being actually Moab, which has just been conquered, and that's been added to the Assyrian realm. Now, it's not easy or trivial for Assyria to get into the Egyptian territories. You can see Gaza fell last time. Don't know if I mentioned that. These extra troops are here just because the army's full up. I can pull them out in order to do a battle if need be. And now we're on the Median. And we'll see whether it goes from there. Okay, there's a distinction I may not have paid much attention to, but it's really important here. The Medes used up their turn to increase their stack of defensive units in their capital, or whatever that city is. I don't know. They don't really have a capital. They can't be conquered the same way they do, but they can't be conquered the same way other countries can. But the Egyptians are out here. They have a reasonable little force all filled up, but maybe I want more troops. And I'm not allowed to build new troops in a regular, in just a force. I can buy mercenaries in a force, but I don't believe I can build troops there. Let me make sure. Yeah, it has to be in a city in a home area. Well, the problem with that is everything down here isn't my home area. This stuff is all associate areas, and I think I cheated, of course, for the Assyrians and allowed them to build something in what amounted to an associated area. Those territories can be conquered without going through the conquer step. They can just be taken from the enemy, and then they become part of the conquering country's territory. So they're not really, there's no Egyptians I can raise there. So since I'm out of mercenaries, I could buy perhaps some Judah mercenaries or mercenaries. Now everybody else has picked theirs up, except for Assyria's still got one. I'm going to have to kind of fall back and give that territory that I gained up. It'll slow the Assyrians down, though, and probably make it so that they can't easily conquer me, and thus take a chance at winning the game. And the Egyptians pretty much managed to pull back without taking too much in the way of attrition losses. I think they only took one hit for... It's actually not that bad a move. It's 1, 2, 3, 1 attrition loss, 4, 2 attrition losses. But still, the shorter route to the north is a little bit more painful if they wanted to do it. But then I noted, looking up siege rules, because I'm curious about, hey, will I be able to cope with Babylon, if I lay them under hunger siege or whatever? Will I have enough troops? And I found there is no troop requirement. You can lay something under siege with no forces at all, which kind of makes sense. I mean, they can throw a sortie out if they think it's ridiculous. Which means that this had to proceed to a hunger siege, and I upped the level. But, I'll leave it as it is. Maybe I shouldn't. The thing is, the Urutru would get to come out in combat. So I don't know what to do with that. I think I'm going to run the combat right now. That they come out in sortie. If they end up driving off the Cimmerians, that's cool. And as we push through the rest of the sequence, I still have the tail end left, which is where all the meat really is. The Assyrians, the Babylonians haven't been doing much. Elam did some more raiding and then bought something back. I don't remember what. They spent a decent amount of points on something, but I don't remember what exactly. What is this? Oh yeah, they're immune to trade raids. And then through the miners, there really isn't anything left here except for Phoenicia, which doesn't get a turn. Urartu doesn't get a turn. They don't have a card. We got to the Cimmerians, they draw their card. And this was an Assyrian turn for them, and they mainly destroyed the Cimmerians by an attack through here that got intercepted to try to protect the Cimmerians from the Urartu. And just not a great situation. I never am happy with things like that where alignments switch back and forth, and basically one person may be looking to destroy the faction that they're playing, and then the other person's trying to save them even though they're fighting against. It just feels funny. Sometimes it's cool, like things like that happen in Geronimo, or sometimes, not very often, where you might have desires that go opposite to what you'd think the faction you're running is. But here it feels particularly false in this case. Okay, as we enter into the Assyrian turn here, first of all, look at all the points they have. They had another one backed up, but they played an assassination card and managed to get rid of a meat leader. I'm not sure what the Egyptian top leader is. They can't see onto the card, but they can see the top pieces on the board. They couldn't kill a king, and this one is one they're going to face. So it looked like a good leader to kill. I'm not quite sure how you're allowed to assassinate someone that you can't see. You're not allowed to look onto those cards and investigate them. Well, maybe you're allowed to look at the card and then you'll see the leaders on top. Maybe you're allowed to investigate leaders when you play this card. I don't know. But that was indeed actually the best choice, so I shouldn't gripe at all. Now comes the problem, because it's decision time. The Assyrians have a ton of points. but it ain't going to be enough, right? And one goal is, do I want to try to knock Egypt out of the war? Basically, if I could knock the Medes and either Egypt or Babylon out of the war, I'm going to have an easier turn next time, because all I have to face would be Edom coming back and whichever one that I can't knock out. So I ought to be focusing on 2 countries. If I'm focusing on Egypt, I should run down here and start taking their home countries, because that's all that matters for conquest. If I'm not focusing on Egypt, I probably do want to take Gaza and maybe Petra, just to strip away some of their and perhaps even Elath, just to strip away some of their capabilities in their associated areas and get myself more income for next turn. That's an appealing concept. It's easier to get income off associated areas than off of conquest. But for this all to work, I really do have to start making some moves on Babylon. So I think that's where I'm going. Running into a definite problem, though. I realized I've run out of Assyrian troops. I could garrison this and take 1 more city, and that's it. I can't hold all of the Assyrian cities, the Mede cities. So I'm going to have to funnel this guy up to take another city, and I may need to funnel someone else into play too. It's hard to conquer and fight this many wars at once. Point-wise, I think I do need to boost another unit, to use high frontier terminology, into Medea as well. So I may have trouble, even taking out 2 people this turn, which is cool, because honestly it shouldn't be a trivial thing to just knock out a couple of powers. But the Medes are particularly difficult, and I guess that makes next turn the turn that I have to try to go for the overall knock everyone out. So I don't know if I'm going to get a shot at getting Babylon here. End up with a fairly painful regular siege attack here, not an assault. Might have been, but I don't know. I took like maximum damage, basically. Yeah, I took 5 hits, which is the most I could have possibly taken doing it. So I guess I'm good not having assaulted, because that would... I know it doubles at least the fortress, but I think also the units inside. So I would have taken a lot more hits, and I only reduced them 1 level. But that's okay. I'm not viewing this as my main focus, and I set up a hunger siege here. I've got to get the Medes out of the game, though. Well, out of this turn. Right? I got to knock them out for next turn. That's an obvious goal, and I'm spending a lot of effort on that. And trying to set it up so, maybe I can take the other 3 down all at once. That seems pretty damn unlikely too, though. Assyria has a lot of power, but even, in the strong point they are right now, they're not overwhelming. The question I have is, what about balance, in terms of the play? Let's see how it plays out. Do any of these, poor beat-upon people? It's kind of like playing France and Poland and, Russia in the early part of World War II. It's not a lot of fun. Well, I disagree with that, but I can see where people would say it's not a lot of fun, and I just did. But it's not... you don't have a lot of opportunity to strike back. And that's fine. I think we will later. The question is, can we make up for, this kind of excessive point gain that's being generated here? And given that, there's no points for, like, successfully resisting a siege or stuff like that, this game really only favors whoever's on the attack at any given time. And that could be problematic if Assyria is able to maintain the offensive for a long period in the game. They're just going to, because it's sort of a glory point system. If they get enough off of the early part of the game, I don't know, you don't know unless you've played before, we don't know how this is going to play out in the long run. How finely balanced is that connection? Is it a situation where I think the optimal would be most of you know, if all of the other non-Assyrian powers end up kind of working together, not fighting and squabbling too much, they should come very close to winning. Which kind of puts a pressure on them. Each one should come very close to winning. That should put a pressure on them to kind of compete a little bit. Because if one can do a little better than his buddies, like say Edom here, they should be able to get the victory out of it. So far, it's felt like nobody can really contest the Assyrians, and that is historically reasonable. As we finish up the little tail end of the after the Assyrian turn in this impulse round, something to do with opportunities lost, basically. The Egyptians spending to build up. The Medes actually did a raid here. I think they heard. They got the Edom, which means they failed on one, and I think they got a Babylonian there. They're trying to assure themselves the second raiding there, but that may be hard if the Phoenicians sail their boats out. Now, the Medes have something in hand, which will get played, which is this fire ships. It's a no action point cost, so they're just throwing away the 4 points for the card. That might allow them to destroy some potential. They might actually go for the Phoenicians, which are more likely to score trade points rather than the Assyrians, which would have to fight their way through. Let's see, the Babylonians had, this is the definite missed opportunity. They were holding this turncoats card, and if they had launched a sortie when the Hunger Siege was first set up, they might be able to pull mercenaries out of the army group. I don't know how many are in there as the Babylonian. It turns out there's only one, which, you know, means it was probably a good idea not to. If you win the battle, you get to keep the suckers. Otherwise, I think they go to the regroup box if they survive. It's kind of a neat opportunity. But instead, I just ended up building up some forces and banking a couple of points. I may have trouble. I'll be able to buy a card each turn. The Egyptians actually used their card to get 2 new cards. They used the Pharaoh Takes Command card to get 2 new cards. Give them more opportunities for building up in the future, so they don't have to pay that big 5-point blast out of their APs. For Assyria, this was a big issue. They can't afford the interrupts. I've already kind of talked about, well, those interrupts are getting more expensive. Well, they've gotten to the point where whatever money I might get, or APs I might get off a card, aren't going to pay for what I've got established in terms of conquests in other people's territory. Where, okay, look, you know, I don't have to pay. I can roll for attrition on all of them, and I've been rolling for attrition on things like these cav here that are 2 steps right now. But once they flip over to the next step, I can't lose them, so I have to pay. Which is kind of a troublesome thing. One neat thing about having these cav out here loosely is that they can reinforce more quickly. They basically pay half cost for movement, which is kind of nifty. What else? I guess that's about it, and we're about ready to slam into the next round. And, you know, I think everybody's going to run out of cards pretty soon, except Assyria, who's got a whole pile of cards. They better be thinking about using their battle cards. Now, they get to hold on to them. That'll give them a better pile to choose from in terms of cards. But they've got pretty good cards in their hand. It's just a matter of they can't afford until they win, say, against the Medes and evacuate that area to use them for interrupts. Otherwise, they'd be interrupting, you know, everybody who gets an actual impulse that they could. I think since we're done with this round, this is a pretty good place to stop the video and move on. It'll be a little shorter than some of the others, but that's okay.